Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel, and today I am going to be doing a review of this book, A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. And I've already talked a little bit about this book when I was sort of in the middle of reading it. Now I am completely done. I finished it 2 days ago, and I've written down sort of my notes about the book, my thoughts, and just talk a little bit about it. So overall, I thought that this book was, it was good. It was a fun read. It was an entertaining read. I didn't think, and I think a lot of other readers, I've looked at some reviews, which I normally like to do when I finish a book, and I didn't think, like a lot of other readers didn't think as well, that this was as entertaining of a book or as gripping of a book as the previous two in the series. The first book was incredibly entertaining, very gripping, sort of a pick it up and you can't put it down sort of a thing. Same with book two, almost even more in book two. And I think that was because we were introduced to the character Feyre. She was going through a lot of self-discovery, a lot of very important events happening in her life that allowed her to become something more than she had ever envisioned. And also, it was dealing with her romance. It was sort of her romantical life. So that is pretty entertaining, I would say. And you want to see her get with the right guy. And I guess I should say at this point in the review that if you don't want spoilers, you should click away. So you've been warned. Here we go. So, of course, book one has her shacking up with Tamlin. Book two, she realizes that her relationship with Tamlin is not as she thought. She gains more perspective, and she ends up becoming the mate of Rhysand. And so that entire sequence of discovering that a relationship was not as she thought, and ultimately becoming the mate, basically the wife of another man. Can you call him a man? He's immortal. I don't think you can call him a man. Another, he's Illyrian, right? So whatever. But that whole sequence was very, very entertaining as a reader. So I just poured through those books, read them super quick, loved them. I have not gone back and read them. I would like to at some point. I do like to reread books, but I just have so much that I have on my plate to read that it will probably take a little while, probably a year or two, before I reread them. This book concerns itself more with war and battle and politics, and it was very entertaining. And I guess in terms of war and battle, I can't help but think that this was probably on purpose, that the acronym of this was ACO War, right? I think it's on purpose. Because it's concerned with war, which basically resolves itself with like two battles. The first thing that I noticed when I was reading this book is that I wish that the author had put in some more sort of previously, in previous books, types of moments. There are many, many characters in these books, and they all have backstories. And so I find it pretty hard to remember names and what the sort of relationships are between these characters. I wound up having to look up quite a lot of characters and their backstories. So I wish that there had been a bit more explanation throughout the book as to characters' backstories. I also want to mention Sarah's use of question marks, or should I say her non-use of question marks. Now, I mentioned a video or two ago about her continuously using words. Like, she gets stuck on a word and she really likes it, and then I don't think she realizes that she's using that word as often as she does. I mentioned the word tang, gossamer in previous books, stalked. There have been others. Those are not there are many other examples of this. She gets stuck on words. There's also this concept in her books lately, in this series and in her other series, where characters don't use question marks all the time. And it was cool the first few times where the character is so strong. They have such a strong personality that they don't even allow themselves to be questioning. When they ask their questions, they say them as more of a statement. But I have to say, in this book, that probably occurred at least 50 times. It started to get sort of annoying to me. And maybe that's just me being sort of like a grammar Nazi. I don't know. I didn't mind it in concept the first few times that I saw it. But after a while, it just gets to be sort of wearing, and it loses its impact, I guess I'll say. One thing that I really enjoyed about this book was Feyre's interaction with mythological entities and fallen gods. That was really interesting. I thought that especially the monster in the depths of the library was done wonderfully well. I love sort of Lovecraftian themes. Now, I say this as someone who has not read very much Lovecraft. I've read a little bit, but really I can't claim to be any sort of expert on Lovecraft. But one common thing that Lovecraft deals with, that he really, stresses in his works, is mankind interacting with things, monsters, entities, worlds, etc., that are too big for our puny human minds to comprehend. And so oftentimes that means that there may be some angles to geometry of buildings that it doesn't make sense to us. It looks strange. It might be that there are monsters where it's just, they're too monstrous to be described. And that happens definitely, I would say, with the monster that Sarah describes in the bottom of the library. I also just love this magical library. I saw Sarah speak about this book. I went to a signing of hers, sort of an author talk, which is great because I actually have a stamp in the book you can see sort of shining there, which is awesome. And so I saw her talk, and she was asked about the library in this book. Magical library carved into a mountain. And she brought up Beauty and the Beast and the library in there. And I just love that whole thing with libraries, thinking of libraries as these magical, mystical places. I think my favorite example of this is in the book Lirael by Garth Nix. And this whole series, the Old Kingdom series, I just adore. This is the sequel to Sabriel. And I'll never forget the library in this book. So reading about the library in Sarah J. Maas's book, A Court of Wings of Ruin, sort of brought back memories of that. And yeah, magical libraries, A+. Something else that I want to talk about with this book is the sex scenes, quite frankly. There are a fair number of sex scenes in this book, as there were in previous books. These books have been much more adult than her other series, though I sort of feel like her first series, the Throne of Glass series, is going through the sort of Harry Potter transformation, if that makes sense. It started as young adult, just like Harry Potter started as middle grade, and sort of has progressed over the course of the series, over the years, to become more adult. So you start to see in Throne of Glass sort of sexier things, and definitely in these her other series, you see pretty explicit sex scenes. Not to the extent of some books in the romance genre, I'll say, but definitely some pretty graphic things. And I want to sort of talk about that because these books are for sure marketed as young adult. They're in the young adult section. Go to Barnes & Noble, you'll see them right there. But I don't know. I think that they're sort of just trying to get the marketplace there. And um, it's sort of interesting. I think that maybe if parents knew, maybe they wouldn't want their kids to be reading these things. But then again, I think sort of they're reading a book. They're probably going to turn out okay. So yeah, who knows? But I guess one thing that I do want to say about the sex scenes though is they felt sort of perfunctory to me. What I mean is, I don't know. I sort of felt like Sarah had to put them in somehow. Like she felt like she was expected to put them in. They didn't feel that sexy to me personally. I don't know. They just were sort of boring. And there's parts moving and toes curling. I think she uses that description a whole bunch, and everyone's happy and things are being shared, but it didn't feel nearly as engrossing as previous books. I think again because the mating bond is already settled. We know that these characters are committed to one another, whereas in previous books we didn't know who she was going to turn out with. The mating bond wasn't settled. She was making decisions, self-discovery. So I didn't buy it with the sex scenes in this book. I don't know how she could have worked it better. I personally just wouldn't have put them in. I would have had a fade to black type of a thing. I think it is perfectly obvious by the characters' interactions with her mate, Rhysand, that they are very committed to one another and that they have a loving relationship, and that they enjoy each other's company, both in terms of emotions and in terms of physicality. So I don't know. The sex scenes didn't do it for me. I suppose I didn't think that they belonged there. Another thing that really surprised me about this book was her father appearing at the end. He had an entire armada of ships with him, and her father had hardly been spoken about in this book. I don't think that we've seen him in person since book 2, maybe even book 1. I honestly don't remember. And so it felt really like a huge deus ex machina to me, just not expected. And sometimes having a twist and something not be expected is like the greatest thing that you can throw at the reader, I think. But this felt cheap, felt like she had a huge army over here, and even with these monsters that they had made deals with in order to get them to fight against this huge army, it still wasn't going to cut it. And so Sarah was thinking, gosh, what else can I throw at the troops of Hybern? I guess I'll have the father come sailing back with a huge army of ships. It didn't feel very realistic. Maybe I don't remember enough about the father's backstory, but really, I thought he was just a merchant, like a very high-powered merchant, but that was my impression of him. Maybe I'm wrong. Perhaps I should look it up before I put my foot in my mouth. The last thing that I was really surprised about was that there were no major deaths. It felt like we were really gearing up for it, and maybe she wanted to just have that be a surprise, and she's very attached to her characters, clearly, and doesn't want to lose any of them or kill them off. But I was surprised that there were no major deaths. The bringing back to life of Rhysand was touching, but I don't know. Again, it felt sort of like just can't let go on the author's part, and it was a rehashing of the first book when Feyre herself died, so, and was brought back to life, obviously. So I don't know. It felt like there should be something changed about these characters at the end. And Amren was changed. Now she is not her monster self. She's just a mere average fae. So she's still immortal, but she's not the Amren that she used to be. Now we still need some development with Feyre's sisters, Elaine and Nesta, but I don't know. It sort of felt like the characters were the same at the end as they started out, and that surprised me. And I guess the last thing that I'll say is that this book just felt very long. And I felt this with Sarah's last few books, is that they just feel very, very long. Now, I know that she has the tendency to just write and write and write, and she's a very prolific author. She churns out at least 2 books a year, and she has no issues giving a huge word count. But I don't know. I felt that this book could use some better editing. I felt that some bits were very exciting and some bits dragged and dragged. I really liked the beginning when she was in Tamlin's court. That was very interesting. I liked seeing Feyre play them and do her best to mess with the court dynamics and make it unstable. But yeah, I just thought that it was very long, this book. I felt that with the previous Throne of Glass book as well. This one, right here, Empire of Storms. Instead, it just needed to be cut down, I thought. There's no reason for these books to be so long. And I love them, but sometimes things need to be shortened a little bit, I think. We can get to the point a little quicker. So, let's talk about what I'm going to be reading next. So, what I have picked to read next is this book by Anne Bishop, the Black Jewels Trilogy, and I'm going to start off with the Daughter of the Blood. This book is huge. It's almost 1,200 pages, and so it contains 3 books. And I honestly don't remember how I heard about this book. I think I heard it recommended by somebody online. Reading through the first, I think I've only read 20 pages or so, maybe even less. I've read 16 pages. So reading through even the short amount of it, I have to say it actually reminds me of Sarah J. Maas. I feel like I can't get away from her. And that's not bad in my book. I really do like her, despite some things that I've said in this video. So we'll see what happens. I think that this is also going to prove to be a sexy read, but based on some of the praise at the beginning of this book. Vividly painted, dramatic, erotic, hope-filled, intense, erotic, violent, and imaginative. This one is white hot. So we'll see. I don't remember how I heard about this book. I had just placed it on my Amazon wishlist, and my grandma got it for me for my birthday. So I'm very excited to read it. And yeah, we'll see. Looks like standard fantasy with a little bit of romance mixed in. So very excited for that. I'll just do the first book, and maybe I'll go on to book 2 and 3. We'll see. So thank you for sitting through this long video, and see you next time. Bye.